Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. All I ask is that you think.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to another episode of the Just My 3 Cents podcast, a live, rapid fire, interactive podcast where we discuss race, sex, and culture, and ultimately try to make it make sense and raise the culture with your help. So, if you're tuned in on YouTube or Facebook, you should see the link in the comments because our ultimate goal every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sometimes I have to move it, but for the most part, I try to be here every Wednesday night. And we got 30 to 40 minutes. That's why we call it rapid fire, where you can jump on and we can discuss issues of race, sex, and culture. I'll lead with the topic. You can talk about the topic I'm talking about, or you can say, hey, I saw this week. Again, I go by Black Socrates, and you can jump on and basically almost like a Dear Abby for race, sex, and culture and say, hey, I saw this. What do you think of this? So you can jump on and interact with me for the Just My 3 Cents podcast. But to go ahead and get into what I've been promoting this week, this title of today's show, if you will, is hating Black women and dating outside the race. I entitled this particular podcast, Hating Black Women and Dating Outside the Race. Let me start with this first. First of all, this is not, believe it or not, a conversation about interracial dating. If you keep listening, you'll understand what the premise is and what led to it. Some of you may have already seen a lot of this idea, in a sense, unfortunately, floating around social media based on, I don't know if it was a podcast or some other thing that I saw floating around. I didn't even want to watch the video where you saw these, in a sense, I guess what I understand, these two brothers were down talking sisters and the idea of dating Black women and not dating Black women, which is a theme that I've seen and witnessed and saw throughout my lifetime. But again, it's trending as we speak. And so just to be clear, this conversation is not an interracial discussion. Believe it or not, I'll say this very quickly and get into the premise of where we're really going with this discussion. So when it comes to interracial dating, again, I'll say this. If you saw I think it was just last week's show, we were talking about the idea of race being a social construct. And so when you fully understand that, I personally, I'll say this, think it's a waste of time to be concerned with who other people choose to love, if you will. I personally think it's a waste of time. If you feel different, no problem. If you're not used to how we rock in the Mental Dialogue Community Club, which this podcast is a piece of that, then you understand we don't have to agree with each other. It's an idea of listening to each other's thoughts. That's why I openly accept you coming on with me live to give your thoughts as well. But from a personal standpoint, I have never seen the real benefit of being concerned with who others love. But let's weave that into this discussions in particular. And so what I want to do was tell you how, again, this is being predicated, from what I understand, video that's kind of running social media. I saw a couple of friends post it, but I didn't watch the video and you'll understand why I didn't a little later here. And again, you can jump on it anytime you want. But what I'll say is, here's how I felt about specifically Black men who basically talk down on sisters and basically would highlight the fact that they prefer to date outside of the race. And, the initial thought is, wow, if you're in that position and that's how you feel, Black man, is that how you feel about your mother? Because if you're a Black man coming from a Black mother, but now you won't date all women, like, do you hate your own mother? Like, that is, a thought that always crosses people's mind when you see men who openly talk down on sisters and applaud other races. Or like, we've had this discussion on the Mental Dialogue Talk Show many times, and I remember, just even my disdain, just to highlight this real quick. If you remember a few years back, there was a term you would hear in hip hop music. I got me a foreign, and they wasn't talking about a foreign car. You know what I mean? Basically highlighting, somehow elevating in a sense, women that were not black of foreign origin being higher than black women. So culturally, we've definitely had all type of issues when it comes to this. But I want to tell you again how I felt about this in college and how I feel about it today. And I think how I feel about it today is what made me really want to address it when I saw this floating on social media. And so hopefully you'll bear with it. And I won't make it take too long. But again, the way I felt about it in college is very different than how I felt about it today. And I think how I felt about it in college is what I see out there now, how a lot of you feel. And I think there's a chance to elevate, or i.e., raise the culture even beyond this thought process. So, me growing up in the South, I went to a military school when I was in college and things of that nature. And let me even give this backdrop as well, because we've had shows about interracial dating. So some of again, even though this show is not about interracial dating, some of it applies to give context to get to specifically these black men who, and unfortunately, will talk down on a sister or talk down on black women and to highlight other races as being better than their own, right? And so let's bring some of that context in. And so I've talked about even my own history in the South, where growing up having this concept, you've heard this white is right, or that type of thing. And so I've talked about it on the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, even my process to loving myself, coming to love my own, and being able to place my own black woman on the pedestal that she deserved. That was a process even for myself. So when I went to college, I by the time I went to college, I was definitely at a stage where, sisters was absolutely my preference, but I wasn't necessarily opposed, in a sense, for stepping outside the race. But this is what I would see at the school that I went to. There were some black men who had a disdain for black women. And I thought, how, just like anybody else, how could you have such disdain for your own? And so, having went to a military school, you would see a lot of interracial dating. And as I said at the beginning of this show, I personally don't have a problem with that. But the men that I would have problems with is those men that would talk down on sisters. And it was clear that they would never date the black men who would talk down on sisters. And it was clear that they would never, ever date a black woman. And then coming from the South, here's something else that I would see. And I would see it. I went to school out in Midwest. And so coming from the South, I used to see this back home where I was from. And I saw a little bit of this amongst some of these same men who had such a disdain for their own, if you will. But I remember, again, even in high school and middle school, having a little curiosity for whites in particular, because where I was from, it was just black or white in the South where I was at. I didn't really see other races until I went out Midwest, just being real growing up. And so I remember that some guys, even where I was from, they had got a propensity to, in a sense, date white girls only. They didn't necessarily talk down on sisters, but they had got that propensity. And one thing that I never understood as a young man was that how I would see some guys, and I think this is kind of a Southern thing, where I would see some guys. Let me get my man Frank on this thing, because I can definitely jump on here with me. What's up, Frank? How you doing, King?
All right, right. How you doing?
All right, so I'm gonna finish this thought and we'll get you in here.
Absolutely.
So I remember I would see some guys when I was young. They would date what I would consider big, fat, ugly white women, and never would consider dating a sister. Like that just made no sense to me. And so for me, for me, I was always like, that was so perplexing. I was like, okay, if I was even going to consider dating a white girl, I would want a pretty one or whatever. And so when I went off to college, I would notice that, especially amongst the black men who had a lot of disdain. It was almost like they would date whoever of a white woman just to not have a sister. And so I remember when I was in college, here's my position, and I'll move past this. So my position in college was, while I had no issues with my, in a sense, classmates who would date different races, if you will, I made it very clear, loud and clear, and would express it to these brothers that, man, if you got such a problem with your own, Or I would even go as far as to clown them if I know they were kind of like some of these men I saw back home who would just date these ugly girls. I would almost go out of my way to be like, damn, that's considered okay. Like I would go that far. Like that's how I moved. I would actually jump, kind of, mess with them a little bit, and told them I had a real problem with the fact that they would not date their own because it was absolutely a sign of self-hatred. See, again, just dating outside your own does not designate that. But if you got to the point where you look at sisters and say, hey, I would never date a black woman because of how she looks, how she wears her hair, how she acts, or she has some type of attitude, I had real that when I was in college. So that was how I felt back then. Here's the transition to why I wanted to do this show today. So the transition to where I'm at today, because again, we're in the social media age and we see these constant conversations, unfortunately, where, I call it the gender war, whatever. And then this stuff like this rears its head, and you see these men that are making it like proud to announce all these reasons why they don't want to mess with black women and they prefer women outside the race, right? And so I remember being in this relationship group one time, and this was maybe a couple years ago. Lil Wayne, for example, had said something similar to this as these guys that are floating around now. Lil Wayne had made a comment, and it looked like he was talking down on black women. I don't remember exactly what the comment was, but the reason I remember is because we were involved in this group, and in this group, the sisters were distraught and upset that, hey, here's this another. It was almost like here's just another superstar, and Lil Wayne has children by black women as well, and so here's this other superstar that now that he's gotten this fame, he's publicly denouncing, in a sense, black women, if you will, and now gonna basically date outside the race, and they were very upset. And so here's where my position changed. And so when we were in that conversation, this group was basically a group of black men and women who, in a sense, were seeking one another, but we would just have open dialogues. And so I was listening to one woman that was just very upset about it, and other women were kind of jumping on the bandwagon and saying this to us as black men, like how this was such a problem and that black men would, in a sense, let this happen and this kind of thing. And I said, in this group where there's black women who we applaud you, and in this group there's black men who are seeking black women who y'all applaud us, I have no understanding, and here's the point today, I have no understanding why this conversation makes sense inside of this group, because you're talking to men who clearly love you, that have as the exact same disdain that you have for, at the time, that comment by Lil Wayne and whatever else is floating around currently right now on the internet, where some suckers, if you will, have stepped up to make it well known that they don't mess with black women for whatever reason. And I said, in this group, why would we have this discussion? Because that's not who you're talking to. And the reason this absolutely matters is because and first they were pushing back a lot. And what I ended up saying, and this is when the light came on, if you will, what I ended up saying, again, at the time, this was about Lil Wayne. And I says, well, if that's where he stands right now, you basically have this black man who has proudly announced his disdain for black women. He's someone that you completely X out, because if he's gotten to this position for whatever reason, and we know he's dealt with black women, how many black women has he basically ran through with these underlying feelings and harmed? And now that he's made this announcement, we can cut him off. And that's the point. The point is to absolutely address the fact that this is nothing to talk about, because we should leave men like that who have enough self-hatred to no longer want to date someone who looks like their mother, cut them off and leave them in a vacuum. Let me see what my brother Frank thinks about this. I see you working out, brother. So I'm trying to get you in at the right time.
I appreciate it. I think I missed the last part. Can you repeat that last part again, please?
So ultimately, I was just saying how when I was in college, I would sometimes check certain men who would openly express disdain for dating black women, and they would only date outside the race. And as I said, I didn't have problems with black men who would date interracially. That didn't bother me personally, but the men who actually expressed disdain and would not black women, I would check them. But I'm saying now in 2022, we're in a situation now where men like that should not get, in my opinion, blown up on the internet, because they're in a position where black women should easily know we don't want to touch them. And at the end of the day, the idea of however they got to that position, they probably ran through a couple of black women that all they've done is harm, because they've had this underlying thinking, self-hatred, and all they've done is harm black women. So we should be glad that they announced themselves, and we shouldn't let it bother us one bit. That's my position today.
Hey, bro, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Well, as somebody who is very well traveled and has a very global opinion about certain things, first of all, what I heard last night was hate, right? And my position is the expression, I disagree with the expression, but why are we interpreting that as hate? It's his opinion, it's his preference. Let's flip the script. I'm a black man, I'm an African. If I say I don't date Hispanic women, would this be all over the news? And secondly, um, if somebody has a preference as to who they date, we can feel any way we want to feel, but why is that word hate? I disagree with the word hate that is being, what do you call it, statement being interpreted as hate. He doesn't like it, that's what he wants, but the hate, I disagree.
So let me give you the example you use. Let me tell you the difference. So when you said that you as an African, if you said I do not date Hispanic women, right? Would it be over the news? Let me explain to you the huge difference, Frank. The difference is how much sense does it make for you to say I do not date my own? That's something completely different than just choosing not to have preference for not having a preference, in a sense, somebody outside your own race. So you have to understand it is a huge difference when you have decided I will not date someone like myself. That's very different than having a preference even for another race. A preference for another race versus I will not date. That's not the same thing, brother. I see you working out, so I'm gonna give you a second to jump in on that. But do you see that's not the same thing?
I appreciate that. It's not the same thing, and I appreciate that clarification. However, I don't see that as hate, though. I think that we are a bit overreacting about this whole situation. You know, I don't date somebody like me, like my mama, my sister, my auntie. Great, but hate is where I have a problem with. He is not hateful. I think that all of our choices in this life and
let me give you another thought process on this. So we're not talking about someone expressing I prefer outside of my race. We're talking about people that in them saying I do not date my own, they're talking down on every woman in their race. They're talking about as if every woman in their race is these terrible, and they're calling them terrible, they're saying terrible things.
Has this been the case? All right. Has this been the case for this man his whole life?
So
we don't know.
So what does whole life got to do? Because what I said was
whole life got to do with experience. Whole life got to do with experience. So let me give you an example. As an African, with my experience, there was a time in my life where I did not date African Americans. Is that hate? It was based on my experience, how African Americans have treated me when I came to America. So I don't think it's any different. So the question is, has this man been like that since day one? Then that's a different conversation. But I don't think that's the case.
Day one, Frank. It doesn't have to be day one. You're still in a sense stepping outside of culture. if you were to go back, I know I know your background. So if you were to go back to your own culture and say this about your own culture, what would your own people say about you? Right? If you were to go back to your own culture, not a different culture, if you were to go back to your
Yes,
own culture and say, I no longer hear this, not only do I no longer date, but all you do is say bad and negative things about your own culture.
they're not going to accept that. It's unacceptable.
So that's what you're
Yeah,
missing.
it's
That's what we're
unacceptable.
saying. So that's what we're saying. Again, I know you're in a different culture, but you're
Right,
missing
right.
it up because this is within the culture. These men are not only saying again, it's one thing if you say I prefer outside my culture. I don't call that hate. But if you tell me I don't deal with black women because they
But
do
has
this,
ha,
they all hold on.
but
They all do this, they all do this, and they all do this, and I ain't dealing with no black
that's
woman.
wrong.
It's clearly that ain't just wrong. That's hate. But
Yes,
it ain't just hate of their own. They're hating what they see in the mirror psychologically. That's how you can no longer date your mother, brother. So that's the distinction that we're making here. I'm gonna give you one last thought because I know I'm interrupting your workout, brother.
hey, I really appreciate that. I'm going to get back in. I'm going to get back in. I
I know
appreciate it.
that, brother. So anybody else, you can hit that link. That was my brother Frank giving his perspective from an African culture. As you can see, he kept stepping outside of the culture, and then as soon as I brought it home to if it was within his own culture, he was talking about like that. It made sense. Again, he was coming from a worldview. I know enough about the brother to know that, again, as I said at the beginning of this wasn't simply about preferences. However, what I wanted to bring to the table is, in a sense, my 3 cents to raise the culture is, in a sense, even this show is going against what I'm saying. Let me see if I can explain myself. So basically, I think I saw Taraji P. If you've seen, I think there's a little back and forth between her and Lamar Odom or something like that, and she didn't address it, which was beautiful. She just put out a little tweet that said, energy is expensive or whatever. And it was clear that she was referencing the Lamar Odom situation. And so my point of using that analogy, if you will, is these type of men should be giving no more energy whatsoever. And we let them stay in their little world and in their vacuum, because let me show you how it plays out. If we could collectively now say, okay, you've announced yourself loud and clear. We'll leave you over there because not only are we glad that you've announced these are your feelings about black women, now all black women can easily stay clear of you at all time. But here's the other part for men that are doing that. So for men that are willing to do that, and again, this is something that's so floating social media currently as we speak, from what I understand. And again, I didn't watch the video because I don't want to hear what they got to say about black women. It was clear that it was something negative. And so again, this is me trying to give it zero energy. And so when I say even this video is going against what I'm suggesting to the culture. So what happens is when men like that do that, again, we know how people would do things to get click and get noticed on social media, if you will. And so they'll only do that amongst other men who they know feel that way, because they know they, in a sense, they're to a degree, they're not willing to, in a sense, step outside of their circle and say that to, in a sense, around African-American men who love black women, right? They would never do it. So they get comfortable in their circle. And for what I understand, maybe, I think this was maybe a podcast or something. So these, two men, and again, this ain't the only example of this, but when people are, in a sense, doing it, they're doing it in their comfort zone, away from, and again, other African-American men who would not condone that. And so they get into their comfort zone, and the reason they're willing to put it out there is because they want it to run. They want it to get out there. And so what happens is when we give it energy, we actually serve their purpose of announcing all of this disdain and negativity that if we're watching it on social media, especially our queens out there, our sisters, you're soaking this up. And for a split second, you're disappointed and hurt by some other black men, again, now talking down on sisters. Whereas I'm saying we should be happy to know that these suckers are in a corner and no longer, because they've announced themselves, would be harming a black woman again. So I hope that 3 cents makes sense. Again, I used to check those type of men, and I'm saying let's pay them no attention, let them go off into their own little vacuum and get no attention. And again, don't allow them to, in a sense, get any notoriety, make any money off of talking down on black women, which has unfortunately become very profitable now. I think we unfortunately realize that has become profitable. Oh, so I got some comments, y'all. I'm sorry. Let me jump in the comments. Okay, so that was pretty much the gist of my thoughts. Like, again, when I was in that, I'll say this, and I always end it with the piece from my upcoming book by the same name, Just My 3 Cents. If you want to jump on, if you got any thoughts about what I've said or want to give your own thoughts, you can still click the link and jump on like Frank did earlier. But what I'll say is that, as I said, when I was in that dialogue amongst this group of black men and black women who were seeking one another, these sisters were very upset about, again, what, an example that Lil Wayne had said a couple of years ago, and was just basically saying to us, like, why are black men doing it and how it made them feel. And I absolutely respected the disdain that and how it made them feel. But I did eventually have to say, however, we're in a group where it's black men and black women seeking one another. So why would we give that any energy in a group where that we love you? We're trying to figure out if we can, who like who and not, and just happen through natural dialogue. So you're in a group where none of us care about that. And unfortunately, the reality is when people get to maybe a certain celebrity, or even, again, this video that's floating around, those two men, unfortunately, and they raggedy asses said it in the comfort of one another. Because the reality is we always forget that for the most part, all of us, is by human nature, we run in relative circles of people who are like ourselves. And the reality is it happens so much that you typically don't intermix or even risk saying controversial things when you're outside of your circle. So again, these people have to get very comfortable, be inside of a circle like themselves, to even talk down on black women like that. Or when you see it's happening, yes, you better believe that is a circle of men who all unfortunately feel that way. And black men who don't feel that way are not sitting around not saying anything. It's just they don't run in that circle. And that's my reality in life with all of the gender war stuff. We've been very fortunate with the Mental Dialogue Community Club to surround myself with sisters who do nothing but highlight, and black men who do nothing but take care of and protect one another. So what we see on social media is not happening in our community, if you will, not happening inside of our circle, inside of our family. Like, when we hear the horror stories, it is stepping out, again, in the dating world. It is a process to find someone who's compatible. It is a process to find someone who is not hating themselves or needing to heal and hurt people hurting one another. We always say that comment, right? And so it is a process. So we all can, in a sense, will have our stories when we've ran into someone, in a sense, who may remind us of maybe even our own healing or things that we needed to heal in ourselves, so that we no longer attract those type of circumstances. So this is a 30-minute rapid fire. Thanks Frank for jumping on with me. I want to share this piece like we always do to end the show. Again, this discussion, while I said it wasn't necessarily an interracial discussion, I do have a piece in the Just My 3 Cent where I address interracial dating. So I'm going to share this piece and get off this thing. Hope y'all enjoyed Just My 3 Cents, the rapid fire podcast where we make it make sense. All right, let me pull this up and I'm going to read this to y'all very briefly. This piece, again, from my upcoming book, Just My 3 Cents podcast, book, Necessary Conversations on Race, Sex, and Culture. Book coming soon, so be on the lookout for pre-sales. This piece is called Black Socrates Speaks, Interracial marriages for the last time. Of the black men who are currently married, 76% are married to black women, which means that 40 married black men lined up, only 10 of them would not have a black woman by their side. On the flip side, 1 in 4 black women are married and 1 in 3 black men are married, and y'all are worried about race mixing. Plus, the last I checked, 9 times out of 10, the children will be black, which is why white supremacy hates it, which means we should all be in agreement with anything white supremacy hates, in my opinion. More importantly, how about we just get married first? Kings, a lot of us, myself included, have been out here chasing manhood in all kinds of misguided ways when the ultimate sign of manhood is being responsible for the well-being of a woman and your/her children. Queens, stop letting these feminists tell you not to be defined by your marriage as if there is some other position on earth higher than that of motherhood. Yes, you are just as capable as a man and in other areas more capable, but it is your ability to give life that makes a man willingly lay down his life for you. To lay down your life for him is to emasculate him and out of order. Please know the real power is in the order, not the one or the other, him or her. Yes, white supremacy is alive and well, but if we were to bring things black in order, healthy marriage before children, we would immediately negate 75% of the systemic bullshit white supremacy racism places on us. And if we are as magical as we say we are, imagine what we would accomplish with only 25% of the BS left. Just my 3 cents. By the way, please know the color of my lover's hair is black. Hashtag Nina Simone. So that's it. Make it make sense. Tune in Saturday. Amazing show. The difference between investing and trading, featuring Michael Sutler, brother with over 15 years of commodity trading as a commodities trading advisor to include Forex, and the principal at SC Capital. Great show, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. The difference, what's the difference between investing and trading? Great conversation on Saturday. Hope you tune in. Please share this one with others. I'll see y'all next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I say one more. I'll cut a comment real quick. Let me catch this comment here at the end. Says some men. Let me catch this comment. I just saw this comment from Nikki. She says some men are making decisions to date exclusively due to unresolved trauma experiences. I'm assuming the exclusively is outside the race. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Their own unresolved trauma is why they're stepping outside to date outside the race. And in deciding to exclusively date outside the race, they're taking the time to announce their trauma as if, because again, they haven't dealt with their own trauma, so they objectify and place it on the black woman and talk a bunch of BS about black women. I don't know how much you caught of this, Nikki, but I was, go back and watch it. But I just said ultimately they deserve none of our energy. Let them stay over there and harm whoever they decide to date, whatever race they choose to date, and not harm any more black women, because whatever their trauma is, they probably hurt some black women before they finally made that decision to step outside of the race, because they're still looking outside themselves and placing blame on black women. Leave them over there. Let's give them no more energy on social media. That's what they want. They want attention. And if they're on podcasts, they want to get paid for making the dumbass statement. I say we leave them in their vacuum with only people that already feel their way, and don't blow them up on social media no more. So those are my thoughts. I just wanted to say that very quickly because I don't know how much you were able to watch and catch, but that's a quick wrap up of what I've talked about. But go back and watch it if you caught the tail end of it. But thank you for the comment, Queen. With that said, we're out. I'll see y'all next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we make it make sense.